Who's actually going to get the most out of a flagship tri-camera drone, and who would be better off putting that money toward a lighter setup or even a different hobby? If you're on the fence about spending a six-figure-ish price tag on a piece of flying tech, you're probably wondering whether the performance boost justifies the cost, or if you'll end up with a fancy toy that sits mostly idle. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Those are the exact questions that keep most potential buyers up at night, because buying the wrong drone can mean wasted battery cycles, a steep learning curve, and a whole lot of frustration before you even capture that first perfect shot. Let's start with the basics of the category. Drones that aim for professional creators sit in a sweet spot between the hobbyist-friendly models, think Mavic Air 2 or Mini 3 Pro, and the cinema-grade rigs that require a dedicated crew. The expectations are higher. You want reliable autofocus that locks onto moving subjects, low-light capability that doesn't turn every night scene into noise, and a gimbal that actually keeps the footage buttery smooth even when the wind picks up. At the same time, you don't want to spend months wrestling with a menu that feels like a flight sim cockpit. Battery life, transmission range, and how intuitive the remote feels become make-or-break factors for anyone who plans to shoot on location, not just in the backyard. The Mavic 4 Pro Creator Combo checks a lot of those boxes, but it also brings a few trade-offs that matter once you're out in the field. First up, the camera. The 100-megapixel Hasselblad sensor is a game-changer for stills. In daylight, you can pull out massive 6K frames at 60 frames per second, and the HDR processing captures detail in both highlights and shadows that most drones in this price range miss. In practice, that means when I flew it over a sunrise-lit coastline, the horizon stayed crisp without blowing out, and the sand textures kept their grain. The dual telelenses add flexibility, giving you tighter framing without having to physically move the drone, handy for wildlife shots where you need to stay back. Low-light performance is where the Nightscape omnidirectional obstacle sensing shines. The sensor can work down to 0.1 lux, so you can actually capture usable video after dusk. I tested it on a city rooftop at twilight. The footage retained color fidelity, and the gimbal didn't introduce the jitter you sometimes see when the motors struggle in darkness. However, the real-world limitation is the reduced maximum ISO. When you push into true night mode, noise starts to creep in if you try to go beyond a certain exposure. For most creators, that's acceptable, but if you're a dedicated nighttime cinematographer, you might still need a dedicated low-light camera on a ground rig. Stabilization is handled by the 360 Infinity gimbal, which offers 4-axis movement. On a breezy day, around 15 miles per hour, the footage stayed rock-steady, even when I performed aggressive maneuvers. The gimbal's ability to rotate fully around the axis means you can achieve those over-the-shoulder shots without repositioning the drone. That said, the extra mechanical freedom adds a tiny amount of weight, shaving off a couple of minutes from the advertised 51-minute flight time. In my testing, I consistently logged around 48 minutes per battery under moderate throttle, which is still impressive, but something to keep in mind if you're planning long-range runs. Transmission range is another highlight. The O4 Plus system pushes the video link out to 30 kilometers, about 18.6 miles, with a 10-bit HDR stream, which translates to a reliable, low-latency feed even when you're a few miles away from a base station. In a real-world scenario, I used it to follow a moving convoy across a rural landscape. The feed never dropped, and the latency stayed under 150 milliseconds, which is crucial when you're trying to keep a moving subject in frame. For most creators who shoot within a few kilometers, the range is more than sufficient, but the true value emerges for documentary work where you might need to stay hidden or out of sight. The remote controller, RC Pro 2, gets a lot of buzz because of its 7-inch rotatable screen that's bright enough for sunny days. It essentially puts a mini monitor on your hand, so you don't need to pull out a phone. The UI is streamlined. The main flight settings are a few taps away, and the menu hierarchy feels logical, not a labyrinth of nested options. However, the learning curve is still present. If you're a total beginner, you'll need to spend a few hours in the simulator mode before you feel comfortable pulling the trigger. The controller's ergonomics are solid, but the weight, around 1 kilogram, can cause arm fatigue on longer sessions if you're not using a harness or a tripod mount. Battery confidence is bolstered by the 3-battery pack included in the combo, plus a 128GB SD card and 512GB internal storage. Swapping batteries in the field is straightforward, no need to open a panel or fiddle with clips. The batteries hold up well over repeated cycles. After about 30 charge-discharge runs, the capacity dropped less than 5% in my tests. That